Ciao, everyone, and welcome to Spazio, a monthly series that highlights Italy's enduring role in the space ecosystem. I am your host, Kelly Kiedis Ogborn, and to our viewers all over the world, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today is episode 7, where we will discuss all things Italian National Space Day, which has now expanded to 2 days, which will be December 13th and 14th this year due to increase in demand, opportunity, and partnerships. Joining me for this discussion are two of the gentlemen behind the engine making this happen. First, we have Colonel Aniello Violietti, who also goes as Nello, who started his Air Force career in 1994. A pilot and a graduate of the Air Force Academy, he earned his military wings in 1999 and became a combat ready pilot in 2001. As an experimental test pilot, he led flight test activities for Tornado and AMX ACOL aircraft, holding key positions. As a test pilot, he also clocked an impressive 3,500 military flight hours on 51 different aircraft. He later transitioned to strategic roles, leading the Innovation for Aerospace Office of the Air Force General Office for Space, managing ITEF suborbital flight strategies. He also served as the deputy head of the Air Force General Office for Space, and in 2019 became head of space and aerospace policies in the Office of the Prime Minister's military advisor. Currently, since 2021, he has been working at the Embassy of Italy in Washington, D.C. as the space attaché. In addition to his professional achievements, he is an associate member of the National Research Council and was awarded the title of Knight by the Italian Republic. Nello, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Kelly. Good
Absolutely.
morning, everybody.
Absolutely. And also joining us is David Logsdon, who is the Senior Director of Space Policy at ITI Space Enterprise Council. David fosters relationships between private sector executives and federal agencies, emphasizing the significance of space assets to economic and national security. He crafted and executed a strategic cooperation plan involving multiple countries, resulting in memorandums of understanding agreements with 7 nations. He also has played a pivotal role in securing technology safeguard agreements between the United States and Brazil and Australia, leading trade missions to both Brazil and Chile. Additionally, he is the private sector lead for DHS CISA, Space Systems Security and Resilience Landscape, and is developing a space cybersecurity zero trust framework. David also serves as the vice chair of the IEEE International Government Subgroup, contributing to global space and cybersecurity standards. He holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the University of Delaware and a master's degree in political management from George Washington University. David, also a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you, Kelly. And Maestro Nello, good to see you as well.
Nice to see you.
This conversation, I imagine, is going to be extremely engaging, extremely exciting, primarily because, there's so much opportunity activity on the horizon that is going to be jam-packed into 2 days, but involving multiple stakeholders and multiple entities that are really looking to drive the future. And so to set the stage, before we really dive into why is National Space Day important? Why are these activities important? I would love for each of you to talk about the 2 days and what's going to be happening. So, David, maybe you could talk about the 13th. Nello, you talk about the 14th. Really, who are the players? Why should people be interested? Why should they come? So, David, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Kelly. And let me give some background on how we actually got to the 13th. So the Space Enterprise Council has been around for 23 years. Starting in 2017, we wanted to do something a little bit different, and that is focus on the international market. Focus on international cooperation and engagement. We felt it was then an underserved area. Space Foundation has done wonderful work over the last 5, 6, 7 years in that front. Our work is complementary to the Space Foundation's work. So starting in 2017 with a trade mission to Brazil, which you mentioned, and then trade missions to Brazil and Chile in 2019, we have made international engagement as one of our primary focuses. As you mentioned, we have signed a number of MOUs. Those MOUs with like-minded trade associations in our allied countries create a nurturing policy, legislative, and regulatory environment for the Space Enterprise Council member companies to either create new business development opportunities in those countries or scale up those opportunities. We also are a trusted voice in terms of helping push along government to government negotiations. We're smack dab in the middle of the technology safeguard agreement discussions between Brazil and Australia, respectively. Those ended in TSAs. So starting last year, we wanted to capitalize on these relationships. And last year we held our first ever Global Space Summit. We were thrilled and honored to have Aniello participate. But we wanted to take it one step further. I reached out to Aniello and I said, why don't we do this again this year? Why don't we do it at the Italian embassy? He came back to me and said, why don't we make this a 2-day event? So here we are.
Lovely. And Nello, from your perspective, why was it important to add that layer of conversation to the days, and especially because we always talk about fostering B2B, but the B2G and the G2G is also critical. So, what was your thought process behind that?
Well, actually, when David came to me, I said and proposed this opportunity. I just thought about the space. It's all about international cooperation and the collaboration now. It's nowadays no nation could lead a space program by itself, and we're looking about Moon and Mars and all these activities that we are going through, but we have some needs like technological needs and economic needs that we need to work together. So why don't we do? We create event at the embassy all together, and David gave me this great opportunity. I would like to go to your previous question, because you were talking about why people should be at the embassy on the 13th and 14th. Well, I would say that this year, last year was a kind of a test bed, like test pilot. So I tried to apply my, this is my background in my everyday life here and my activity. So it worked really well. And so this year I decided to do 2 days, and especially we decided to increase the level increase the challenge. What's the challenge? I'll let David talk about the 13, what's going to happen, but on the 14, we are going to start with the commercial space dialogue. Everybody knows that President Meloni and President Biden had this joint statement during the last summer, in which we announced the initial of this space dialogue, commercial space dialogue. So the industry, B2B, talking each other with support of the governments. When we as government, we should support them to try to create this bilateral collaboration. So we are going to start in the morning with a commercial space dialogue with the support of the Space Office of the Department of Commerce. They will lead with us the conversation. We are going to have all the companies coming from Italy, and after I'll tell you who is coming, with many companies from US, and I already know that there is kind of a call that the Department of Commerce has done to your companies here in US to try to fix and try to understand where we can find solution to make these companies work in a better way, in a faster way, trying to solve it, to fix it. At least we as government know which are the problems. Soon after, we are going to start the B2B session that we're going to go through the whole day. But we are going to have some things that I would say some events that I'm not going to unveil now, but it's going to be really interesting, because we are going to unveil some things that we're going to do soon as Italy, in collaboration with US. We are going to have this networking lunch, starting networking lunch after the morning, and soon after we're going to have this workshop today that actually you, Kelly, are going to lead. Yeah. And I'm very proud of that. I'm honored. And we are going to talk about how non-space sectors could be could influence the space sector, and especially we are going to concentrate about space foods, but not only. And after that, we are going to have this huge final reception to conclude the 2 days event, and this is we are going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, if, as you mentioned, last year was the pilot, and if that was any precursor, which was tremendously successful and so fun and exciting, I can't wait for this year. And David, leading up to that, so as Nello mentioned, there's going to be a lot of, G2G, B2B conversation happening on the 14th. How does the 13th lay the groundwork for that? Because I know that you have some, very impressive people that are going to be participating, and narrative wise and goal wise, what do you hope to get out of the 13th?
Well, let's focus on a word that you have on the slide here, Renaissance. So the Italians started the Renaissance in the 1400s and really drove the narrative in terms of arts and culture. The Italians also drove the narrative in terms of fine tailoring. If you want a bespoke, a tailored suit, you go to Italy. The Italians have driven the narrative in terms of incorporating emerging technologies into sports cars. Italy is the cradle of sports cars, and so they are the cradle of building in emerging technologies. So what does that have to do with space? Everything I mentioned so far are greenfielding opportunities. The topics that we're going to discuss on the 13th, we believe, are greenfielding opportunities for the global space ecosystem, whether it's cislunar space, the LEO economy, or how space innovation is driving the fourth industrial revolution. That's smart manufacturing, smart technology, greenfielding opportunities from a global stage. And we're hoping that the discussions that take place on the 13th identify actionable, implementable items that can be incorporated into either current bilateral agreements or added into future bilateral agreements.
That's great. And I have a question for both of you, which I'm just curious about because, we talk about space being international and cooperative, and the global space ecosystem has really started to get a lot of, I would say, more attention and interest in the coming years because people are now realizing that it's not just rockets and satellites. Nello, as you mentioned, space food, right? It's all of these other industries that have implications. Is there something that comes to mind that might surprise people that is going to be discussed on the 13th and 14th? Because I think that people that are paying attention start to pay attention in these disparate areas, but what could you throw out as maybe a teaser that somebody maybe didn't consider and why they need to come and participate in the discussion?
Nello, you want to go first?
Okay. First of all, I go back. I forgot to mention before that Bocconi is also working with us. The Space Economic Evolution Lab from Bocconi is working with us and working with Space Foundation. And I want to mention also the participation and collaboration of ITA and Italian Space Agency. So said that, I want, before going to your question, Kelly, I just want to mention that during the day, we are going to have the participation of full Italian industry ecosystem, industrial ecosystem. I mean, from Leonardo to Telespazio to Tasi, the Orbit, Argotech, T4I, Avio. I mean, basically, we are going to have all the CEOs of the main companies in Italy. That's being there this year will lead. Actually, will give the possibility to people in there to just be in contact. And I cannot say everything because still there are some issues that I just have to fix before. But you are going to be in contact with I guess one Italian food companies that actually they affect everyday life here in US, not only in the world. I would say they will be there with the highest representatives and we are going to, as I said, to unveil some things that it's going to happen very soon with US companies, especially talking about ISS and what's going to be next. You know that we are going to have an astronaut, let's say, colonel from the Air Force flying with Axiom. In that mission, there will be many things happening, and during the day, we are going to unveil many of things, and all people will be there. They are going to have the possibility to be in contact with this huge the food companies. That's I will say that will give an idea on the contamination of space.
Yeah, the non-space into space is really critical and interesting. And one thing I'll just say to plug a past Spazio, we had Argotech and Axiom on, and we actually got into the topic of space food. So for our viewers, if you haven't seen that one, definitely watch that one, because it was really interesting to talk about the considerations and all of the creativity happening that you can do right in low Earth orbit and beyond when you're thinking about keeping astronauts healthy and nutritionally supplied, but also just allowing them to have some of those creature comforts of things they might want, like espresso and really good pasta sauce and other stuff. So that is definitely a good episode to watch. David, what about you? What would be something that you think might surprise people?
So a few weeks ago, the Biden administration released an executive order on artificial intelligence.
Hmm.
Shortly thereafter, our OMB released a memo to our federal agencies stating how to apply the executive order. If you read between the lines of the executive order, there is a big play for the space industry, particularly in research and development.
Mm.
So that is certainly, as we see it at ITI, a greenfielding opportunity. What we know that we don't know what we don't know. And what I mean by that is that the impact of artificial intelligence on our industry 3 years, 5 years from now is going to be profound. I've asked each of the speakers to shortly touch upon the impact of artificial intelligence in terms of the specific issue that they're going to be speaking on. But artificial intelligence, emerging technology. What we know now is just minuscule in terms of what we're going to be seeing in the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, that's a really critical point because as we're all, pushing toward this collective wish. I mean, David, you talked about cislunar economy. Nella, you talked about Mars. We're all moving toward this eventuality, and there's the space industry as it exists now. There's the space ecosystem as it's evolving, and then there's the future that we're all building toward, and everyone plays a critical component of that. Um, I think from an overall objective, if you could lay out maybe your top goal for the day or days, rather, the 13th and 14th, what would be the main takeaway that you would want participants to have? And it can be knowledge, it could be business contracts, it could be whatever it is, but what would be a win for you?
For me, we have a mix of developing and developed nations on our panel sessions who quite often don't have an opportunity to network. And since we're in this for the long haul as a global space economy, and Kelly, maybe you could throw out the figure of the $1 trillion number that the Space Foundation has come up with, to be discussions between developing and developed nations in order to really see that come to fruition. It's talking about space situational awareness. It's talking about global standards for space and cybersecurity. We don't have enough opportunities as a global space ecosystem to have those discussions. If only a few of those discussions take place between, let's say, in Ecuador and Italy, that is certainly a win.
Yeah, I completely agree. The access and opportunity is critical. And David, to your point, so they're projecting that the global space economy is going to reach anywhere between 1 and 4 trillion by 2040. But the Space Foundation put out our space economy number for 2022, and it's 546 billion. So we're almost halfway there. until to the 2040 mark. But to your point about the emerging nations, I think what's more interesting about that number is that right now there's roughly about 80 countries that have space agencies, but there's 92 countries operating in space, which is even more fascinating because we're starting to see a lot of these offices emerge from trade associations, or not, sorry, trade associations, trade ministries, and defense departments in other countries. So people are realizing if you don't have a space strategy, you need a space strategy. And I think that the United States and Italy in particular too, being the third country to engage in space beyond the US and Russia, can act as these beacons and these roadmaps of how people can do it and should do it and how they can have a seat at the table. I think it's a really critical piece.
And I would also add, we're starting to see a cultural change.
Hmm.
Change, I mean by that, if you look at every single one of us in the space industry, whether we know it or not, are also cyber professionals. That's a
Interesting. Yeah.
change. So what Nello is doing in terms of bringing the the food ecosystem into the space industry, whether these industries know it or not, they're also space companies. It's changing the paradigm.
Hmm. Agreed. And Nella, when you look at the future of Italy within space, and you pointed on a lot, there's a lot happening, right? So there's an astronaut that's going to be going up on an Axiom mission. There's you guys are involved in a lot of the lunar or the ISS outpost, but you also design for the lunar components. What does this mean for the future of Italy's engagement in space? And what would you want people to walk away from this understanding about how Italy is a player and what the future holds?
Very interesting question. Thank you, Kelly. Actually, first thing that I would say is that we don't have any Bezos, we don't have any Musk, we don't have any Branson that we could support. Like we have this kind of guys that we support with their money, fresh money, our ecosystem. But I would say we have a very strong industrial ecosystem, Italian ecosystem, and David was pointing out for the past ISS and stuff. That more than 60% of ISS is being built in Italy. We have a full chain of value. From Italian companies, like from launcher to satellites to basically to pressurized model. So what I would like to what is the final goal of these 2 days? Basically, to have the possibility to let the U.S. companies and U.S. Ecosystem know what Italy could provide for this country in this country. Basically, we are going to unveil other things like that, but we are opening. There are many companies from Italy that are investing here in the US. They are moving here in the US, and there are some other companies from US company investing in Italy. But sometime often it's really important to let the system here know what we can provide. For what? For as I said at the beginning of this episode, for international bilateral collaboration towards a multilateral collaboration. So we need to work together. So we're going to show what we can provide, what we can do to reach the final goal, like in international environment. That's my final. I would like to have this as a final result from today's event.
That's great. And what are you guys, so outside of the 2 days, so 13th and 14th, we're going to hit all those goals that you mentioned, I have no doubts. What are you most excited about for the future? So you talked about tremendous opportunity, access for emerging countries, emerging technology, but what really makes you think that space is the place for people to engage?
Well, I could start first. One of the discussions that Nell and I had, it's cross-pollination with other industries. I had mentioned at the beginning of my comments that Italy has been and remains the cradle of sports cars. And so we are looking at doing programming that would bring in some of the largest Italian sports car houses and talk about how they deal with supply chain issues, how they have dealt with incorporating emerging technologies into their supply chain, into their manufacturing processes, and how that can be applied to the space industry. What we do, we need to do a better job as an industry looking at other industries and incorporating and embedding best practices. And what better way to do that by looking at the Italian sports car houses? We're very excited about that potential programming, and I think your audience will be as well.
Nello, what about you? What gets you very excited?
For the future, yeah, we are talking a lot with David about this cross coordination and the factor like to take in the space, to bring in space what each country, especially Italy, could really provide. And we have this very big and very important automotive machine industry that we can. Yeah, just put in the space sector, and plus you have the space companies, the food companies, sorry, in this. But I will say I'm really excited on being like to create a lunar village that is like branded by Italian companies, and I explain better. We are working a lot with NASA, especially for taking advantage of our heritage on the ISS on this pressurized module. So why not think about an Italian lunar village with like that, actually international lunar village done by Italian modules, pressurized module on the moon, and with inside with like for everyday life on the moon with the space food from Italy and technology like 3D printer from Italy and like automotive technology from Italy in the pressurized model. So it's really excites me, and I think we can really contribute to the future of the space exploration.
If you need patient zero to go and live in that colony, I'm signing myself up. I'm happy to do my cause. Um, no, that is fascinating, and I think you illuminate a really good point there. Is that what I've learned, especially engaging, more and more with this project and having these people on, is that Italy really does touch every aspect of the space value chain, from the heritage, being third in space, and now all of the emerging tech and the ecosystem you have across the country. So you really have built this really impressive base to continue to scale your legacy on. So in the short minutes that we have left, if people are interested in attending, where can they find out more information? How can they sign up? What does that process look like?
Well, actually, I go from there is ITAs promoting a lot to the ITA Houston, promoting a lot online and actually on LinkedIn and all other social media. And I guess Space Foundation is launching, helping the same thing. And for you, David, I guess you are. I just leave the floor to you to promote your part.
We're leaning on a lot of the same resources, but we also have our own listserv. Plus, I would mention that Space News has an events page, and I believe at least the Global Space Summit on the 13th is mentioned on the events page. Now we'll have to check to see if both events are on the Space News events page. Or certainly you can reach out to either Nello or I. My email address is dlogsdon, Logsdon at itic.org. And Nello?
Yeah, Aniello.Violietti at esteri.it. It's kind of complicated, but if you go online, you will see my name and everywhere. So.
What we can also do, if you guys are okay with it, we can drop that information into the comments, so people will have direct access, either email or some registration links. That's probably easier, and it'll give direct access to you. In our final, minute and a half, any parting words, anything we didn't talk about that you wanted to make sure we highlight to get people in the door on the 13th and 14th?
Well, I would foot stomp on the point I made about the Renaissance. And Renaissance is all about greenfielding opportunities. So that's what we're discussing on the 13th. Greenfielding opportunities can lead to business development opportunities, can lead to research and development opportunities for universities in the United States and abroad. And Renaissance and greenfielding opportunities can lead to better G2G engagement.
Yeah, final comments from my side. I would say, as representative for the government, we are trying to support as much as we can our companies, this bilateral collaboration towards the multilateral collaboration. I would say, and I would like point to the U.S. companies. If you guys want to like to work with Europe, maybe we can offer like a fastest access through Italy. We can like bridge this collaboration between US and Europe through Italy itself. So thank you.
Thank you. And I will give a plug too. I will say that as you know, being part of last year's and continuing on with this year's, the the event is actually quite inspirational, and the conversations, the level and the information is very unique, and just the collision point of having it at the Italian embassy. I think that it's a really good melting pot of U.S. companies, large and small, Italian companies, large and small, governments, academia. I mean, it was a really engaging discussion. And so for folks that are trying to, you know, find out what the future of global collaboration looks like from the US and Italy, it's definitely a place you want to be. You will definitely leave inspired and probably more informed. So I definitely suggest that everyone comes. So to our viewers, thank you for engaging. To both of you, David and Nella, we actually got some really good comments that people are very excited about the opportunities and the ecosystem really growing within Italy. So I want to thank both of you for your continued work, to make the space economy a reality and the ecosystem growth accessible to everyone. And to our viewers, if we don't see you there on the 13th and 14th, we will be having a live Spazio episode from the 13th from the Italian embassy. So please log in so you will feel like you are part of the action, and you will get to hear from some of the companies that are driving those conversations. So we want to thank you for tuning in, for staying engaged, and we hope to see you in mid-December. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.